What is a fishery? How are fisheries managed? And how does conservation and the fishing industry sometimes come into friction? This is the conversation I have with Melissa Mahoney, Executive Director of the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust, on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. Welcome to Science Solutions Santa Cruz. I'm Jonathan Hicken in Seymour Studios at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. And today we have Melissa Mahoney, Executive Director of the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust. Welcome, Melissa, my friend.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here in your cool new studio.
Thank you. So we were just talking before we hit record, and I learned that you grew up in Colorado, and I instantly had to understand, how does a girl from Colorado make it out to Monterey Bay as the executive director of a fisheries trust?
Well, it's a bit of a long story.
Let's go. Let's go.
Right.
We got all day.
Well, the through line is fish, of course. There are fish in Colorado.
What? Where?
All over. In the lakes, we have trout, we have rainbow trout, we have catfish. Anyway, lots of fish. And it was fun to catch them, but I love trying to figure out how they worked. I also love the ocean. And then when I was back home in landlocked Colorado, I fell in love with watching Jacques Cousteau on TV.
Of course, yeah.
So Jacques Cousteau gave me this crazy idea that I could save the oceans, travel around the world as a marine biologist and a diver, and live an amazing life. And that was what from a young age, that's what I wanted to do.
And look at you, you're doing it. You're doing it. No, but so
some version of this, yes.
At what point did you realize that you were going to be a scientist and that you were going to save the ocean? Like, is there a moment you can recall?
Well, the saving part is interesting because, you think as a kid growing up in the 80s, there wasn't a lot of consciousness about saving things, saving the planet. Like, we were doing pretty good back then.
All I remember is being in line, like in the playground at the water fountain. And when the kid was taking too long to drink the water, all the other kids would say, "Save the whales!" Like that's like the only consciousness from the 80s and 90s that I have of ocean conservation.
Right. When you want to be a marine biologist, you're going to have to go to grad school. So I made a deal with my parents that I would go to school in Colorado and get my undergrad taken care of, and they would be able to then help support me to go to grad school wherever that was. So I did. That's what brought me to California, and what brought me to Monterey Bay was I was a graduate student at Moss Landing Marine Labs. So when I arrived at Moss Landing Marine Labs in 1999, I was all set to. I wanted to do something with sharks, but it was 1999, and guess what? Something else was happening. Do you remember?
This was the collapse of the groundfish fishery, if
Yep.
I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Probably our biggest year-round coast-wide fishery at the time is the groundfish trawl fishery. Groundfish just means the fish on the bottom.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you that. Yes.
Yep. So bottom fish. The science community was realizing that this group of fish that make up the bulk of the groundfish fishery are rockfish, the genus Sebastes. Yeah, at some point I kind of woke up and smelled the coffee and said, you know what, I think I could learn a lot about rockfish. So I accepted that I wasn't going to be a sharkeologist, that I was going to be a rockfish biologist. And maybe that was sort of my destiny, because as I look at my career path, it is really rockfish that keeps circling around me, and the groundfish fishery is a fishery that I've been working on and in and next to for, almost 20 years now.
Yeah. You practiced as a scientist for what, 10, 20 years in some capacity or another, and now you're on the solution side. Do you still think of yourself as a scientist?
Sometimes. For many years, I was sort of a conservation practitioner, and it meant that I have a solid understanding of science and a solid understanding of how fisheries are managed. and some understanding of the human dimension aspect of that. And I had this trajectory where, I started in grad school with science, and then I got into the people stuff, and then I got into the policy stuff. And so when you get all three of those things going, it starts to be,
that's when like real change can start to emerge, is like the science and the policy and the boots on the ground action. That blend of work can be really powerful. And that brings me to a question. Can you remember, today you work a lot with fishers, local fishers, and their work. Can you remember back to, your first exposure to a working waterfront in this region, and maybe what you thought about the fishing industry at that time, and maybe like how your understanding of that has shifted over the years?
Yes. Yeah. So when I was a grad student in Moss Landing, there was one dive bar in Moss Landing. And so on a Friday night, when it was time to let loose, I would go down there, and that's usually where I would encounter the fishermen. You'd think we would have had like collaborative research projects and things going on, but at my time, the Marine Lab kind of kept to itself. We did our science, we did our research. We didn't really interact with fishermen in the harbor. But I remember having quite a few interesting conversations with fishermen over a beer. And some of them got kind of heated. Some of them, we learned some things from each other. That was the spark that I remembered as I started to become more interested in what do these people who are on the water every day for weeks, months, years, who learn the trade from their grandfather or their father, that sort of that observational knowledge that they had, that really intrigued me. The other thing, to go back to sort of my passion about ocean conservation when I was younger and saving the fish. So I got to travel through Central and South America when I was younger, and it was so great and wonderful. But I remember one day we were in El Salvador, which is a very poor country, and we went to there was a local fish market. And so we were walking around, and oh my gosh, the like teeny little fish, turtle eggs, baby sharks. I mean, just from a privileged, developed country perspective, it was so heartbreaking to me. But I looked around, and these are people who are just like me or you.
Sure.
They're trying to feed their family. They're doing the best they can. And this is all they have. I realized that day that conservation is a luxury.
Fascinating. Let's unpack that. What do you mean by that?
I mean that if you're starving and your children are starving, you are going to take that turtle egg.
Yeah.
Okay. And for a wealthy nation who values the lives of turtles and has massive amounts of food to feed its people, they can afford to protect those turtles and say, nope, nobody eats those turtle eggs. We're gonna eat our, GMO corn.
Yeah,
we'll
that hits home. That
Yeah.
really hits home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, you get the point.
Sure,
It's sort of like,
Yeah.
and I think the United States and potentially California can get called out for this sort of NIMBYism a little bit.
Sure.
This not in my backyard. Like, we don't want bycatch here, but we want our swordfish.
Yeah, sure.
It is sort of a luxury to say we don't need to eat that. We're going to save that because we like it for some other reason, because we have enough wealth and enough resources over here to feed ourselves. And that's just not the case everywhere.
I mean, would it be fair to say that that's not always the case here?
Absolutely.
Right.
Monterey County has 43% of its population is food insecure.
Okay.
And I think Santa Cruz County is somewhere in that neighborhood,
Yeah,
at
I don't
least
know
a
the number.
third. We have so many people here who are hungry. And sadly, I think it's a lot of people who pick our produce and grow our food for us. That is tragic and a travesty.
And maybe the people who go fishing for, the fish that we all want. We all want our local fish. and we're relying on those families to do that hard work. So in Santa Cruz, I mean, we've got all these amazing research institutions. You got UC Santa Cruz, Moss Landing Marine Labs, and Mbari, and the Hopkins Station, right? We've got all this research. We've got a lot of people that are motivated to do the conservation work and are doing a great job. I mean, you're yourself included. But I have to imagine when you're at the intersection of fishers who are doing the work to feed their families, and you have a scientific background, and you have, these other programs, this tension of conservation being a luxury, I have to imagine is a daily tension that you're grappling with. How does it factor into some of your decisions as a leader and sort of the things that you decide to pursue within the Fisheries Trust?
Yeah. Wow. That's a juicy question, Jonathan. I feel like the tension is, it's kind of around, the crab fishery is a perfect example now.
Sure.
So whale entanglement issue, we have these, incredible marine mammals. Nobody wants to see a whale get entangled or God forbid, actually pass away from being entangled. But because of climate disruption, that is what has happened. And so you have a fishery that previous to that was 100% sustainable in every way. No problems with it whatsoever. Now the question is, do we protect the whales to the extent they should and deserve to be protected? How do we protect the economic value and the viability and the social dimensions of the fishery that depends on going out and being able to access that resource? That is a podcast in and of itself,
Sure
and I'm
is.
probably not the right person for that, but that's a good example of it's not black and white. It is not conservation or industry. It is a dance between how do we have both? How do we understand the system, which I now firmly believe that you need good science, but you also need the people who are out on the water and really understand from a lived experience. They both come to the management forum together and they talk about, what the abundance and distribution and the problems are, and help the people who are in the position to have to manage the fishery and decide how many pounds or how many pots can get used or what the seasons are or what the gear should look like, all those things. They need both parties in the room. And that's something that I have had the honor and privilege to contribute to through my role working for the Nature Conservancy and then Environmental Defense Fund and now with the Fisheries Trust, is to help not only engage myself, but also help fishermen understand how and when they can engage, because it's really their voice that is going to make a difference in having a sustainable and right relation in how we harvest the ocean resources now, because it's just trickier and trickier.
Yeah. I mean, we're kind of starting to talk about fishery management and stuff. So let's maybe can you define for us really like what is a fishery and how are those fisheries being managed at the highest level in the Monterey Bay today?
Sure. Fishery is people going out and targeting wild animals out there in the ocean. So that's what we mean by fishery. And if we get scientific about it, a fishery is generally defined as a group of people using a specific gear type to target a specific type of fish.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
So like we have the salmon troll fishery, TROLL, troll. So that's the booms that go out and the lines go behind the boat, and the lines are trolled for targeting salmon.
Pulled behind the back of a boat.
Yes. Not to be confused with the groundfish trawl fishery, TRAWL, which is a net that goes very close to the seafloor that catches a multitude of flatfish and rockfish, and is another specific example of a specific fishery.
And if I understand correctly, we have 3 primary fisheries in the Monterey Bay. Is that right?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, so what are you thinking?
I'm going towards species, right? I'm going towards the kind of animal. I'm thinking of salmon, I'm thinking of groundfish, I'm thinking of Dungeness crab.
Yeah. Those are probably the three big ones.
Okay.
Groundfish is such a it's a multi-species fishery. It's something like 80 species.
Okay. So that's a catch-all term.
It is a catch-all term.
Okay.
And there's 3 commercial sectors, 1 recreational and 1 tribal sector.
Okay.
So it's also very big, and it is mostly federally managed. So let's take a step back to your question of how our fisheries are managed here. The state, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the state manages fishing activity in the waters from the shoreline out to 3 miles.
Okay.
And then the federal government takes over at 3 miles and goes out to the end of our exclusive economic zone, which is 200 miles. So the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NOAA Fisheries, they are the federal entity in charge of managing our stocks at a federal level. And they are under the Department of Commerce. And there are also 8 regional fishery management councils that are bodies that manage the different regions, and that's the sort of the management forum and place and entity where people go to work out how the groundfish fishery is managed. They manage salmon, they manage coastal pelagic fisheries.
Coastal pelagic, that means more open water.
Yep, open water, but sort of coastal. So
Yeah.
those are sardine, anchovy, squid is managed by the state. But the little things swimming around that are going to get targeted by the purse seine fleet.
And when you're talking about management, you're talking about how many fish are allowed to be caught in any given season or any given location. Is that right?
That's one of them.
Yeah.
So the law of the land that governs our fisheries came from the Sustainable Fisheries Act. Originally called the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act. Woo, that's a mouthful. And that has been reauthorized a few times, but it basically set the stage for, we had some pretty bad management happening in the 80s. We did have the councils, but it was still kind of the Wild West, and a lot of stocks got overfished on both coasts. But that sort of kicked in, the reauthorization in 2006 really kicked into gear and put teeth behind the idea that if a stock was defined as overfished, the council had to implement a rebuilding plan, and that stock had to be rebuilt within 10 years.
Okay, wow. And so how does the enforcement layer come in? Like, how are they actually making sure this happens?
Well, a lot of environmental groups have sued NOAA Fisheries when that doesn't happen or when action isn't taken. Litigation.
Yeah, litigation.
That puts a fire under the government.
Sure, yeah.
I can't speak for the other regions of the country, but I was involved at the Pacific Fishery Management Council, which is the regional body that manages on the federal side the entire West Coast for Washington, Oregon, California. And the culture at the Pacific Council is very much honoring the science and very much working democratically to honor the input of the fishing community. I remember when I started going to council meetings, I could not understand what the heck was going on.
I bet.
They go for a week. There's all these different advisory groups and the different committees, and then there's the main council session, and it just dragged on. It was so boring, and it was like, is anything really happening here? And it took me, honestly, I would say it took me 2, maybe 3 years to really understand that the sausage that was being made, called, how we manage our fisheries, was being made by individual people talking in small groups and then bringing their approaches into the advisory body meetings of the different fisheries that are being managed, and then having the science come in and say, well, this is the stock assessment for the year. This is what we think the abundance is. And then there's, sort of this back and forth about, how are we going to divvy this up across the coast and across these different gear types? And sort of there's all this stuff going on kind of in the background so that when the issue gets to the council floor, it's kind of already been decided. But then no, because I have also seen public testimony on that issue on the council floor change the outcome.
Okay, that sounds like a vote in favor of civic engagement on issues you care about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of both. And it's sort of like you, if you show up and you can be part of that whole messy process, you kind of almost earn some credibility so that when you get to what we call the front table at the end, when they're deciding on the item, they've seen your face, they've seen you in the hallway, they've seen you talking across the aisle. Let's say you're a conservation person, but you went and talked to the drift gillnet guys in the swordfish fishery to understand how they view things. If you are sort of seen as someone who's trying to make compromise, trying to understand both sides, who understands the legal framework, and you come up and you have an idea, then it's like, okay, let's see what we can do with that. And so it's a really cool place for a person to experience democracy in process, in an industry that is dependent on a natural resource that is owned by every person in this country. We own that resource. That is a public resource. And we charge these groups with managing it. And the people who fish on it and who depend on it for their livelihoods can and should be showing up there. And they frankly should be getting more support to show up there. Because I can, if I work for conservation group X and I get paid to go to these meetings, but these fishermen don't get paid to go to these meetings. That is one problem I've seen. So I was trying to make it fair.
If you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science, Solutions, Santa Cruz. Where does the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust fit in this democratic process?
The Fisheries Trust we are hyperlocal. So we are focused on ensuring that we have a sustainable, healthy, viable fisheries and fishing communities here in Monterey Bay. We're a very small organization. So our sort of policy and advocacy side is we have low bandwidth, but we know that is an important issue. So we do our best to track what's happening on the state side with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and the Fish and Game Commission meetings. We also, and by we, I kind of mean me, because I used to go to the council meetings a lot, and so I kind of know where to look and who to contact. And if there is an issue on that's coming up for, let's say, groundfish or something that lands with impact in our region, we will track it and potentially engage. And that has resulted in, the last time I can think of us really engaging was a couple years ago. There was an issue that actually is, this is a tricky thing to talk about because it involved the National Marine Sanctuary. They were seeking to get some closed areas to be able to do coral restoration and research.
In In our region?
In our region. Yep.
Okay.
So on the face of that, I mean, that's great,
Yeah.
right? What got tricky is that they proposed to close several areas that were important fishing grounds for our black cod fleet here. And in past years or in other situations where they weren't so dependent on that fishery, it might not have been such a big deal. But because we haven't had a salmon season in 3 years, our crab fishery has been constrained. A handful of the local fleet who are, they also have a limited entry permit to target black cod or sablefish. That's another really important species here. There were 2 areas that the sanctuary wanted to have closed off that were really important to them. And it just happens that, coral like the same places that the black cod like. And the trust got involved. Initially, we got involved just to make sure that all the fishermen in our region knew what was happening so that they would have the opportunity to comment. So we held a couple of community meetings, and I basically sat in a room with fishermen with my monitor, basically showing them, here are the areas that they're considering closing. How would that impact you? And they talked it over, and I typed up some notes and I emailed it to them and said, here's a summary of your meeting. You can submit your comment to the council. It turned out that group of fishermen who had never commented before at a council meeting, never cared, never known, really didn't know, the first thing about it. They decided to submit their comments based on the meeting that we had and their understanding of the maps and what they thought it was going to do. And it changed the outcome of the council's decision. And the sanctuary did not get all 3 areas that they wanted. In the end, they got 1.
And therein lies your role, right? You're bringing fishers to the table at these sort of large-scale decision-making convenings, and practicing or acting the thing that you were advocating for earlier, which is that all the voices need to be included in this process. And it sounds to me like you are facilitating that for a group of people who maybe would be excluded otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That group of fishermen would not have known that was happening. And I don't feel, as a scientist and as a Moss Landing Marine Lab graduate, knowing that some of my alumni colleagues work for the sanctuary and study corals, and that I was probably persona non grata for a while, maybe I still am, that was really hard. And I put my trust in saying the Fisheries Trust plays a community engagement and outreach role. And part of what we're doing is building capacity in the fleet to understand when management is happening, when things are happening that are going to affect them. And so I did my job that day, and I put my trust in the council members and the council process. Like, they had a really tough conversation because it was the final decision and it was new information, and it was a really tight vote.
This story illuminates back to this tension of what role does conservation play?
Conservation is a luxury,
right?
Or is it not?
Exactly. And so, when I think about the story you just told, it makes me wonder about this sort of almost like a thought experiment here, right? Where, like, let's imagine a Monterey Bay that prioritizes, scientific research or only the health of the animals in the ocean or the ecosystem, and excludes the human communities from it, versus like the opposite, which perhaps we've already done in the past, where we prioritized human fishing and overfish. So we kind of know what happens if we do that. What happens to Monterey as a region if we exclude the fishers and their livelihoods from this conversation about conservation?
It's sort of already happening. I mean, if you go to any of our ports, you can count on one hand or maybe 2 hands how many commercial fishing boats are left. The pendulum swung from kind of pro industry, like catch, lot kind of Wild West or not as many regulations in the 80s and 90s. The pendulum in the last 20 years has swung way more to the side of conservation, all the way up to the state level. I mean, Governor Newsom talks about conservation, the Ocean Protection Council, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. They are very risk averse and conservation heavy because of some lawsuits.
Interesting. It always comes back down to the lawsuits.
Yep. And, there's the court of public opinion,
Yeah.
The social capital of the fisherman who kills a whale. That's not good. Mm-hmm. So, they've had some bad PR. And I guess the rub for me is if we're going to keep eating seafood in California, then we are uniquely poised to do it the right way because we have incredible institutional knowledge. We have a fishing community that is still has a really good foundational knowledge, intergenerational knowledge, although it's fading fast. We have wealth, we have interest, and we have 13 port communities up and down the coast that are reasonably active, working waterfronts that are in various degrees of degradation and could use some help. I mean, that's my challenge to the sort of hardcore conservation community is if you want your poke bowl, then let's get some work done on our coast so that we can have a seafood economy here that not only feeds people, but brings in money and revenue. It's part of what brings people to California and brings people to Monterey Bay. I just had this conversation yesterday at a roundtable in Monterey County with a lot of business leaders who are concerned about offshore oil drilling, as you know, is a threat, 2.0.
Yeah, we did an episode with Katie Thompson of Save Our Shores just about this. So listeners can go check out that episode.
That group of leaders, all the businesses in this bay, their imagery, the draw for the tourists that are coming in is this beautiful bay. And we also feed ourselves from this bay. And I want to make the connection to our food system, and that seafood is a cornerstone of our food sovereignty here. And if you look out at what's happening in the world and how, food is being cut off from places and poisoned and not so great, I think it behooves us as a community, as a region, as a state to do whatever we can to grow things on land the right way, to have responsible aquaculture at our coastlines and to keep our wild capture fisheries going because it's a food source.
So how do we, where my mind goes is how do we actually do that, right? I heard you say we could count on one hand the number of commercial fishing boats in the harbor. I'm thinking of the Santa Cruz Harbor. That's the one I know best.
Yep.
And so, question A is, how many are there, and what are we down from, like at our peak? How many commercial fishing vessels were there?
Yeah.
And then the second thing I heard you say was, the waterfronts themselves needed some love. So, I'm sort of like, I'm starting to wonder, what does it actually look like to get Santa Cruz, or at least the Monterey Bay region, more food sovereign, or having this healthy balance of conservation and fishing economy?
Yeah. We need systemic change. We need change from the top down. And we also need individual people to step up and kind of put their money where their mouth is. If you care about having local food sources and you're someone who loves to go to the farmer's market and get your local produce, you should try and go down to the docks sometime in the summer. We don't have, it's not a year-round thing, but in the summer, you can find fishermen selling off the boat. And then we have 3 companies that are called community-supported fisheries that source from all the local boats and then they process and package that and distribute it directly to you, the consumer. So it's like your farm box that you get delivered to your house,
like
but
a
it's
CSA
a fish box.
almost. Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Go ahead and name those companies.
Yeah.
Let's get them some love.
Yeah, we're talking Ocean to Table is one of them. Then we have H&H Fresh Fish in Santa Cruz Harbor. They do farmers markets, but they also have a delivery system. And then Real Good Fish, which is based down in Moss Landing. They have a box delivery. You can get it shipped to you, or they have distribution sites all over the county, and you order up your fish. You can get, different amounts, biweekly, weekly, family size, little size. You can skip a delivery. All these. Each one of those three groups I mentioned has their own little, magic sauce, and we need all three of them to be successful.
Yeah, and this is the sort of conservation being a luxury again coming up, right? I mean, if we as a community want to have fresh local fish, we need to be willing to participate in the democratic process. We need to be willing to pay a little extra for the local fish. There are things that all of us can do to support this work. At least that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah. I sort of have I apologize in advance when at the trust, what we are trying to do is direct people to where they can buy local seafood. And it is just not that easy. So don't be disheartened if you just are sort of I can't find it. I go to the restaurant but just going to the restaurant and asking where the seafood is from and saying, hey, do you ever source local? I hear there is local fish, maybe you should look into that. If they hear that a couple of times, they're going to be like, maybe there is something to
Our
that.
customers want this. Maybe we should respond to that.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there is a market signal that even if you can't find it, if you just are asking for it, you're sending a signal to that, fish, the retail shop or the restaurant, that you would like to see that.
Well, I really appreciate this discussion of sort of this individual level solution, right? Things that I could do, things I could tell my friends to do, listeners could do, right? I mean, these are important, and in the aggregate can make the right signal, right, and move us in the right direction. I want to get back to this sort of community level solution of what do we need to do sort of at this regional or community level to get the fisheries to a place that you would consider healthy for both the environment and the ocean and the human communities. What are some big things that you're working on? What are your big ambitions at the trust that might get us a little closer to that?
Well, we have a really big ambition to help improve the infrastructure. The fishermen can only do so much with, an aging hoist and no ice. And, the infrastructure at each of the ports is struggling just because there isn't enough activity to keep it going. In the past, there were maybe multiple buyers. There were multiple options. And now there's kind of, one buyer, or there's very few buyers. And so in terms of the market, it's just been consolidated and there's fewer options. There's also less processing capacity. So, fish need to be filleted. They need to be processed. There's very little processing capacity in Santa Cruz Harbor, but most of the fish is getting, anything else is getting put on a truck and trucked somewhere else. There's 3 buyers in Moss Landing, and there's some processing happening there, but by and large also, getting trucked out. There's almost no processing capacity in Monterey. Monterey's got almost nothing left. Each of those places has their own infrastructure struggles, and something that we saw at the trust, or that I've seen over the years working in and around California fisheries, is the abundance of fish, kind of goes like this. And the business support kind of tracks along with that. But overall, over the last 3 years, even those cycles are kind of,
slowly declining.
So there's kind of a tipping point or a threshold. I think at this point, it's not just what the community can do. It's a bigger issue.
Okay.
So, I've started to have conversations at the state level. We have the Ocean Protection Council. They have, as part of their plan, they want to support sustainable California seafood and climate resilient fishing communities. And so I am going to them and saying, all right, in addition to all this other great research you're doing on kelp, and they do a lot of really great stuff that's more geared toward the ecological resilience. But what we would like to see is state and regional, county level, and maybe even city level reinvestment into our working waterfronts as a piece of the puzzle. You know, we have to get our salmon fishery back. We need to keep the access to the stocks going. We need to let the fishermen do what they do best, which is go out and catch those fish. But when they come in, they need to have the infrastructure in order to do their thing. And that's the piece that the trust is, we're trying to work kind of more of the policy engagement angle and try and get the fishing industry back on the radar of economic development in this region.
And so, if or when, maybe better, you're successful and the Fisheries Trust is successful, there would be new infrastructure, say at the Santa Cruz Harbor, that would enable the fishermen to process their catch or to keep it cold or to get it to where they need to get it to. And so the waterfront itself looks different and it becomes more activated, more vibrant.
I think so.
Yeah.
And if there's a little more activity, then you start to see maybe a weekly fisherman's market like they have in San Diego and they have in Santa Barbara. I don't know if you've ever been to the Santa Barbara fisherman's market on Saturdays. Oh my God.
We could have that too.
So cool. We could have that too. We need a little more activity. And so, I honestly don't know what's going to happen. I think we're always going to have a little bit of commercial fishing here.
Yeah.
But we have such a vibrant community. We have such pride in our local organic farms and organic wines and our restaurants and our chefs. Like there's really a lot of pride in what we produce and grow here. And I want that to extend out into the water.
No. I mean, why not, right? This is a community that is so passionate about the natural resources here and all of its beauty and all of its forms and all of its, its wonder. Mm-hmm. It just almost seems to me like counterintuitive that we wouldn't feel the same way about fishing. And it makes me think that at some point we did as a community in our past. We did an episode with Eric Palkovacs about salmon and sort of the culture. There used to be a culture of salmon fishing here, which is, as far as I can tell, essentially gone, at least in the rivers. But it makes me think that at some point we probably felt that pride and we have lost that at some point along the way. But it seems to me to be ripe for injecting some energy back into.
Yeah. I think it's possible to have both.
Yeah.
Great food from the water, great food from the land, and to feed our community with that. I don't know where our time is, but I do want to make sure we talk about our community seafood program.
Go ahead, go for it. The stage is yours.
That is a program that we never intended to have, but when the COVID crisis happened, the fishermen had nowhere for their fish to go. They lost like 90% of their markets overnight. They couldn't fly it anywhere. The restaurants were closed. It was just like, stop. And at the same time, all the food banks were seeing an increased need that people needed help with nutrition. And so we pivoted and set up the seafood donation program. And that enabled the fishermen to move some fish locally for people to be fed locally. And that just kicked off just a whole new chapter for the Fisheries Trust. It's really about equitable seafood consumption.
Sure.
Because when you think about eating salmon or, eating a nice seafood dinner, what comes up in your mind? It's probably like a white tablecloth.
A glass of wine, garnish on the plate. Yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, seafood is generally expensive. You think white tablecloth restaurant. Well, we want those who are less fortunate or in need in our community to be able to access that seafood nutrition. just the same. And so that program has been growing over the last 3 years, kind of coming out of COVID, getting stabilized. I was able to hire a program person again, and
Fabulous.
We have started a dinner series that supports the program. And it is sort of this, two birds with one stone, where we're creating a local supply channel. Even though it's small, it's still a market for fishermen. We buy their fish and they donate it to the food banks. And we now work with 5 food banks between Monterey and Santa Cruz counties.
Incredible.
And something that just started to happen last year, a couple of the food banks, their clients have enjoyed the seafood so much, they now have established a budget for themselves for buying seafood. So it's expanding the volume, the amount that they can buy. And then, so what we're doing, because we still have a pretty small budget, we are offering to subsidize, to, knock $1 or $2 a pound off what they are buying to enable their dollars to go further. So it's this partnership where between us and the food bank and the seafood supplier, we're building that supply channel even more and providing more and more meals. And I think we're now up to, after 5 years, I think we are at 90,000 seafood meals, where I'm hoping this year, we're definitely going to break 100,000, which will be a milestone. But
congratulations. I mean, and thank you for doing that and seeing the opportunity and jumping on it during COVID. I mean, you're solving multiple problems at the same time, food insecurity and keeping the fishers going. And I think, kind of going back to our conversation of culture of seafood, right? An unintended consequence of this is you are propagating the sort of the pride and seafood culture here. So that could pay off, you know, in the years ahead.
Yeah,
so
thank
congratulations.
you.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to my predecessor, Sherry Flummerfelt. She was the director at the time and led that shift and did a beautiful job building all kinds of great partnerships that we enjoy today, including a lot of chefs and restaurants that really wanted to help out. It's called Get Hooked, where the goal is we partner with a chef and a restaurant to have a really beautiful local seafood curated dinner. And we bring in a guest speaker. So we want people to be able to connect in with a fisherman or a supplier or someone from the food bank. And they get to hear about the seafood program or the life of being a fisherman and just build community connection around local seafood, have an amazing dinner. And then the restaurant gives us a donation, a portion of the ticket sales come back to us and directly go into buying more pounds of fish for feeding our community. So it's a beautiful pay it forward. The chefs in this community, both in, Santa Cruz and Monterey, such a passionate bunch of people. We're blessed to have the culinary talent and the passionate people that we have here.
Where can listeners go to find dates for those dinners?
Yeah, on our website, MontereyBayFisheriesTrust.org.
There we go.
We have an events page, and we've got all the dates on there. We have 8 dinners this year, and who knows, we might have a pop-up or 2. Sometimes we loop in Other Brother Brewery or folks like that.
Great.
We have a really cool, in July, we have, for the first time, we're going to do a dinner at a vineyard called Sarah's Vineyard up in the Santa Cruz Mountains with Chef Diego of Colectivo Felix.
Amazing.
And then we, of course, do all the socials. So we have our handles at MB Fish Trust. So
great.
We promote the events as they come up. And we also talk about local, whatever local fishing issues or meetings or, things that folks who are paying attention to seafood and the fishing world want to pay attention to. So like us and grab our handle and learn more about local seafood.
MontereyBayFisheriesTrust.org. The various social handles. So get online, follow Melissa and their incredible work at the Monterey Bay Fisheries Trust. That does it for Science Solutions Santa Cruz. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's really fun.